Welcome to MSP Voice, the weekly show for MSPs by MSPs. Brought to you by Cloudberry, the #1 cross-platform cloud backup. Learn more at cloudberrylab.com. This is MSP Voice. Hello and welcome to MSP Voice. This is episode number 14. Got a great show for you today. We've got Ben Petersen from ResolveIT. Great interview I had with him. He talks about, how he started his business, how he's grown it, some current things are going through and kind of looking at rebranding, and all in all, great interview. So looking forward to that a little bit later. But first, let's go over to the MSP subreddit and see what people are talking about. So we have 4 articles this week in our Best of Reddit series. And we're going to start off with the first one here, asking about opt-out clauses. So what kind of opt-out clauses do you have in your managed services contract? Do you have one at all? And if you have one, what's the period required? Is it 30, 60, 90, longer? So good questions. If you're looking at drawing up your contracts and you're thinking, hey, your customers may want to fire you, or you may want to fire them, although maybe fire is not a word, but that's essentially what's happening, is you've decided to part ways. So what kind of term, how long, and those types of things is what he's asking for. And typically most people agree 30 days is fine. One poster said, I asked them, it's to the end of the next full month. So if you're in the middle of August and, they want a term, then they have to go through September 30th with billing. That allows you time to get your billing lined up and the final bills and all those types of things. And then you also want to consider too is, 30 days, is that long enough for a transition period? If it's a small customer, it probably is. A little bit larger, maybe it's not. Someone asked about, what kind of terms do you do on your contracts, right? So if somebody says, do you do 3-year term with 90-day out? 90 days seems like it could be a long time. But the reply was they don't necessarily do terms; they do month to month. And most other people said, typically if they do a contract, they do for a year, and in that kind of 30-day, type of agreement. But that full calendar month to make the billing line up seems like a good idea to me. And then one final comment towards the end here is, the kind of termination, I guess, is it termination for cause, like you messed up, or is it termination for convenience? Maybe you just don't like each other anymore. And those are 2 very different things. And this person says, that they don't have a termination for convenience clause in their contracts, only termination for cause, meaning the customer did something wrong and you can terminate them, or you did something demonstrably wrong and they can terminate you. So important things to consider when you're looking at those contracts and how you do your opt-out. Next up is, where do you place the full technical assessment in your sales process? So as you know, when you're going through and talking to a brand new customer, you need to understand what their environment looks like. And that typically means you want to do kind of a full technical assessment before you agree on all the final pricing. Because you don't want to say, hey, this is this one price, and then get in there and realize that they have 50 more services than what they told you, and have to go back and do all these types of things. So it's a valid question, and it's kind of a sales process question, because this is typically something that is involved in sales. So before the contract is signed, everyone needs to know what the scope of work is. There's some that say, if you're small and it's a small customer, the salesperson should be able to do it. But if it's a little bit larger, or if you have a more mature organization, you have engineers, then obviously the salesperson can kind of do the initial, get an idea of where he thinks it'll be, talk about some baseline pricing, and then have an engineer come in and do a full assessment. And then someone else even mentions that if it's a very large customer, the assessment may take a lot of time, and you may want to bill for that assessment. But if you bill for it, then you tell them, hey, by the way, if you sign with us, you'll get that back, when off your first month or whatever. So it doesn't actually cost them. It only costs them if they don't choose to go with you. But it does still cover you in the event that you spend 2-3 days and some software and all this other type of stuff monitoring their environment, only to have them not hire you. So a little bit of coverage in case you're kind of concerned about that. But the general idea is you have an initial discussion. Maybe a couple of meetings, you get a basic idea of the environment, and then you kind of come back in and then do a full assessment, maybe even install some monitoring software so you can get a couple of days baseline, and those types of things, and then so it's kind of later in the sales process, not necessarily right at the beginning. So all good advice here on this particular post. Next up is kind of a monetary question, but it's a little bit more too, because someone's asking, what would you charge for a 20-minute, 24/7 service level agreement? So that SLA. And the reason this person is asking is because they're responding to a request for proposal, an RFP, that is asking what's their pricing for a 20-minute SLA, 24 hours. He's like, during the day, that's reasonable, but he's not sure how to handle, 2 a.m. since he doesn't have a NOC, Network Operations Center, in place. So, he's kind of like, what should I do? How should I answer this RFP? Now, some people, suggested, hey, if you don't have your own 24-hour NOC, you could always outsource it. There are companies out there that outsource to MSPs for NOCs. It doesn't have to be 24/7. You might just contract for them for your overnight hours, whatever you determine those to be. Others are like, just charge them a lot of money because that's what it's going to cost you. But then it kind of gets into another discussion about, so this is a request for proposal. And one poster said, hey, if you don't offer 24/7 today, you shouldn't answer the RFP. And that's makes sense. I do understand that. But it can also be, maybe they don't offer it today, maybe they want to, and like you said, maybe they're going to outsource it. But then he kind of goes into a little bit more about, his experience in that when he was starting out, there were like 3 or 4 of them. They did service for a 24-hour veterinarian. And it seemed like every time that he went out of town and someone was on call, the vet would have an issue and they would call the on-call person. The on-call person would never pick up. So it happened a couple of times and he's like, you know what? I can't, this on-call thing's not working to try to provide this 24/7 support. So he decided to go ahead and hire someone and have someone essentially, or 1 or 2 people work the overnight shift. And he then goes in to talk about how the overnight shift in the NOC actually helps them out immensely, because while these people are working overnight, there's no one in the office, they can get a lot of stuff done. So first off, they're not being, bombarded by customer calls and all these other types of things. So they can do kind of that regular maintenance type of stuff, or maybe there was a ticket during the day that requires a reboot or something like that. They can do that overnight, not affect, the business, the operations. And so it kind of frees a lot of things up. So when the higher level techs come in the morning, they don't have all these, low priority tickets and all this low priority stuff that they have to handle. It was all handled on the overnight shift. And he said it's actually ended up working great for him, because now not only are his techs more efficient, his higher paid techs more efficient during the day, but he can truly say he offers 24/7 support. So a couple of things to think about there. Staffing 24/7 is not necessarily easy if you don't have an office location, or if they work remote. How are they working? So all sorts of different types of things to consider, including outsourcing, and saying, hey, you know what, we do 24/7, but it's provided by a third party. If you're cool with that, here's the pricing. So all those great options. And then finally is a non-standard one. We don't often delve into taxes here on MSP Voice, but I think it's an interesting question. Now, I'm not an accountant. This is not legal or accounting advice, so I have no skin in this game. But the question is asking, the poster is asking, are MSPs considered SSTBs and therefore excluded from the 20% deduction under the new pass-through tax law? So new tax law for 2018, there's a lot of new different types of things. And he's basically if MSPs are considered SSTBs and therefore excluded from the 20% deduction under the new pass-through tax law, the definition of SSTBs and the newly issued guidance from the IRS does not make this clear. He's got a link to the IRS guidelines in this post. So, it's kind of it's a tax question. But what's great is a couple of people have replied saying they've already talked to their accountants about this, and their accountants believe that they will be considered. They will qualify for the deduction. So I think there were 2 or 3 different posters that said they talked to their accountants. But at the same time, they said wait until closer to the end of the year, once everything's kind of finalized to make sure that they know. So it's one of those situations where there's a guideline and it talks about certain, professions, but doesn't necessarily talk about IT IT and those types of things. So it's and then there's consulting thrown in. So again, this is a consult your accountant type of question. There are some good suggestions here, some good recommendations, good opinions. But if you're not a tax professional, don't recommend giving tax advice. So that's my professional tax advice for the day. Don't know the answer, but hey, it's a good thread to follow if you are worried about that and getting that deduction. So that was the best of Reddit, and now we will jump into our interview with Ben Petersen from ResolveIT. Hello and welcome to MSP Voice. Today I'm joined by Ben Petersen. He is with ResolveIT, or ResolveIT, ResolveIT Computers out of Missouri. Ben, how you doing today?
I'm doing great.
Good, good. So why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself and about your managed service business, your ResolveIT?
Okay. Well, I living in the town that I grew up in. I moved away for a little while to go to college and stuff, but moved back here about 8 years ago and started up our company. We started off as a break fix model. I kind of based it off of a company that I had been working for out west that was a national franchise, and I liked how their model worked. But when it came to wanting to start my own, I wasn't impressed with their franchise fees. So decided to do our own thing. And like I said, for several years, we ran it just as basically a break fix. We had, say, half of our revenue from business, half from consumer end stuff. The past few years, we've pushed more and more towards MSP. And a little over a year ago, we just completely cut consumer end personal computer support.
Okay.
So we are 100% business now. Most of our revenue comes from our monthly recurring customers. We do have some that are still hourly, break fix, calls you need type of stuff. Yeah, time and materials.
It's hard to get all of them onto that contract, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's different models I've seen. Some people, they won't even take on a client unless they're going to sign a contract for monthly recurring, and that's fine. That's a good model. That may be something we move towards. I see the other as basically, a pipeline. So a lot of companies, they need to develop that trust, and so it takes time for them to see that, and over time you develop that relationship of trust, and then when the time comes right, you can pitch them that, because it's really that's absolutely the number one key that we've seen in our clients, is that they want an IT team that they can trust. I mean, we have access to everything, right? So we have to be trusted partners as much or more so than lawyers or accountants. So.
Yeah, because you have all their data, so you have access to all of it. So it is a big trust factor. But that thought of starting them off hourly in kind of a break fix mode, building up that trust, and then after a while saying, hey, look what we could do if you were on a monthly contract. We could offer all these additional services, and you get better response times, or whatever it is. Then grow. That's a good idea for pipeline. Cool. So what got you into IT? Did you have a career in IT? Did you go to school for IT? What kind of got you into this technical business, so to speak?
As a teenager in the 90s, I liked to play around with computers and tinker around with my dad's computer. And if I broke something, I had to fix it before he got home.
Yes.
So I was working on a timeline there, right? And some of it started off as interest in playing computer games, and I wanted just to work with that, and still started getting more and more interested in the hardware side of it, and I think that's how a lot of people go. But when I got into high school, I had teachers constantly asking me for support or help on their computers, and there was a period every other day that there was an open computer lab, and they suggested that I go down and basically be the attendant at the computer lab to help the students with everything. And that grew from there to, well, every other day there was an hour and a half of Ben, who was basically the network administrator in the high school, and he would just go around and basically respond to tickets from teachers in the high school. So I really enjoyed that, loved doing it, got a lot of experience, got exposed to things that I wouldn't have had any other opportunity otherwise. And then, I didn't do a whole lot with computers for a while. I didn't think that I would do a career in it. I went to university, and my degree is in Arabic and Middle Eastern studies. So I got a bachelor's degree in that. but really kept falling back on IT. I still had jobs working on computers and did side stuff. And so when I graduated from when I got my bachelor's degree, I had just started working for the company that I mentioned before out west, and found that I was, professionally much more interested in that.
Okay.
So I just kept going with that.
Cool.
And
That's
then, like I said, 8 years ago, we started up our own business. So
so. No, I'm guessing when you were doing this stuff in high school, you weren't getting paid.
right. Well, I wasn't getting paid by the school, but what would always come up is people would say, "Oh, can you go work on my dad's computer, or can you go work
Yeah.
on, this, or little referral stuff would come up. It
Yeah.
never amounted to much money, but got me exposed to the fact that, oh, I could make money doing this. So.
Yeah. And yeah. So my experience, I didn't do it in high school, but I did do it in college. And, I worked for the campus IT. So I was getting paid. It was a job,
Okay.
but it was kind of similar. I was going all over campus working for, on administrators, on teachers' computers and professors and fixing their things and stuff like that. So it was different experience because I was getting paid, but I'm sure
Yeah.
probably very similar. And sometimes they would say, "Oh, can you look at my home computer?" And I was like, "Well, maybe, I don't know." Um, so, you talk about, you talk a little bit about your customers. Do you kind of specialize in any verticals that you work with, or is it just kind of anyone and everyone, small business, big business?
We'll
What's
pretty
your
much
core?
take any vertical. We always have a meeting with them before if they're interested, or we've had them as a customer for a while. We kind of know how they work. We don't just take anybody that calls up. That's a recipe for disaster, but we
Yeah.
probably are a little more lenient than some other MSPs that I am acquainted with on some of our stuff. We do prefer certain clients. So if we had our pick, we would go with, there's four main ones that we look for: manufacturers, CPAs,
Okay.
healthcare stuff. So dentists and chiropractors, those are big for us,
Yeah.
good clients. And then like property management companies. So I'd say
Uh,
those four are some of are the ones that we have the best relationships with and have been,
mhm.
the best customers for us.
Okay. Yeah, and a lot of times they're small business, right? They don't have IT and stuff like that, so their own staff, so they need it.
Yeah.
Cool.
And a
So,
lot of them too, they start off small and they're growing, and
mhm,
they don't know at what point they would need an IT person. But if we've been on board
yeah,
the whole time, then they never have to worry about that aspect, right?
yep,
We can grow with them. So.
cool. And so, are you? What kind of software do you use to help manage your customers? Do you use like RMM, PSA, accounting, all those types of things?
Yeah, so our main RMM that we use right now is Atera, and it's decent, like all the others that I've tried.
Yep. They all have pluses
It's
and
pretty good
minuses.
value. Yeah, it's pretty good value for what you have, but I've tried a bunch of
Mhm.
different ones out there, um, and it has ticketing, some PSA stuff built into it as well for automation.
Okay,
So.
cool. Um, and now, how often do you reevaluate, or is that, you know,
So I used to say once a year, but actually I'm ending up doing that more often. I'm doing about every 6 months. I'm looking at
okay,
other stuff just because the market, especially for RMM, is really hot. Like it's super
hmm,
competitive, and so it's
yeah,
nice for us because that means they're all competing with better features and better pricing. But it can get a little overwhelming where it's
hmm,
like you always question yourself: Am I on the best product? Am I really, doing what I should with that? We do
hmm,
use another RMM that we've had for longer than Atera, and I didn't get away from it completely because some of the features that I liked on it,
okay,
Pulseway, and we use that exclusively on servers because it has
okay,
some great features to it.
yeah,
So
okay. So yeah, you kind of use a mix.
yeah.
Um, so we talked a little bit beforehand, and you said you're going through some rebranding and looking at your website and those types of things, and which kind of leads to advertising, those types of stuff. But you know, what's your goal in terms of updating and changing your image on the web?
Yeah, and it's not a total rebrand. We're keeping the same name, and even the logo is
Hmm.
going to keep the same color scheme. But
Okay.
the logo we had done 8 years ago, I really, really like it. But I feel like it's time for a little bit of a change because we needed
Yeah.
the site redone, and the company that we're working with is really excellent, and they offered as part of the deal to kind of refresh the brand. So we're actually going through some different iterations of stuff with that right
Okay.
now. So I can kind of zoom in on what our logo is right now.
Yeah.
And so we're looking at some variations of that. One thing that we are going to do, I could say, is probably drop the word computers and go to something of a little more general, like technology management.
Yeah.
I felt like computers kind of implied the old model of break fix or computer store type of thing.
Hmm.
And so we want people to look at us more as their partners, the VCIO type thing.
Yeah.
So technology management is sort of the epithet we're looking at. So.
Okay. Now, what about advertising? Obviously, your website is part of, your brand and what you look at, but how do you advertise? How do you get people out there to know who you are?
So we don't do a whole lot of explicit advertising. When I started, I had a lot of time on my hands at the very beginning, and I had done the site myself,
Hmm.
and I dug into SEO and learned it,
Okay.
and really, really got us out there. And so we still to this day, that framework, that groundwork that I did almost 8 years ago, between 7 and 8 years ago, is still good
Okay.
in terms of what it's producing SEO wise. Now, as we're kind of refreshing the brand and moving towards some of that stuff's not going to be as relevant anymore. We dropped personal, like I was saying, we dropped personal or consumer and computer stuff about a year ago.
Hmm.
So some of that was geared towards that direction. Um, but yeah, we don't do any explicit advertising. Most of our clients will come from referrals. So
Yeah.
we do a really great job for our clients, and they have businesses that they are acquainted with and partnered with,
Hmm.
and they refer us over. And that is, I mean, anybody that has experience in it obviously will tell you that that is key. You
Yeah,
can,
that's the best kind of way to get business is to have someone else say, "Hey, I know this great guy Ben and his company. They do great stuff." So,
yeah, yeah. I mean, you can maintain your current clients that you have a good relationship with them if you do pretty good work. But
mhm.
if you only do pretty good work, they're not gonna be as apt to refer you over to their friends because
Yeah.
that reflects on them as well. But if you do exceptional work, then that all of a sudden opens up this to the other clients, because if they're referring you over to their friends or acquaintances or
Mhm.
business partners, then that ends up making them look good. Oh wow,
Yep.
they really work with good professionals. So.
Yeah, yeah. It's just like anything, right? It's like I'm not going to refer somebody if I don't think they did, an exceptional job, did great customer service, and those types of things. So it's definitely you want to raise the bar there on how you help your customers. So kind of with that though, if thinking about someone just getting started in services, someone who they're today maybe working for a franchise, want to branch out on their own, what kind of advice do you have for someone just getting started?
So, just getting started, you need to put all your policies and procedures in place. You need
Mhm.
to decide. You need to write some of your own rules, and then be very careful about breaking your own rules. I'm not going to say never break your own rules, because sometimes
Yeah.
you need to break your own rules because they're bad rules, but or they don't apply in certain situations. But be careful about breaking your own rules. Um, Set some good rules in place, and then be willing to adapt those as you get experience, move along. A good way in terms of marketing, as you're starting off, is to get into some of your local business networking groups.
Yep.
Not only are you going to get referrals from those people, but you're going to learn how other people in your area run their businesses. And you're going to learn both good and bad examples of that, because you're going to become acquainted with people that do it wrong, and you're going to be like, oh, I need to make sure I don't do that. And you're going to become acquainted with people that do it right. And they don't necessarily have to be your same type of business. You're going to see some general business practices. So on top of the referrals, there's that advantage of just becoming acquainted on a professional level with other business owners in your area. So
great. So what do you consider being, what's the best part about being in this business, the managed services business?
So I just love the problem solving.
Yeah.
Because technology is moving so fast that there's never any end to the problems that need to be solved. Now, sometimes that's stressful and overwhelming, but it keeps things interesting. Like there are tedious parts of IT, yes.
Yes.
But there's tedious parts of any job. But not all jobs have the opportunity for the problem solving that we have in technology, because of how fast it's moving and how much potential there is there. So
yeah, and I think the other thing too is because you work with a number of different clients, they each have their own separate issues, I guess. So some things are the same, but then a lot of things are different, because you talked about you working with manufacturers and healthcare and property management. They all have different types of issues and different types of problems, so that kind of keeps you on your toes, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, that's another aspect of it. In IT, you get a good little window into how other people run their businesses, what other businesses are like. What's particular about manufacturing. So you learn things about manufacturing that you wouldn't have learned otherwise.
Yep.
You would have never, looked it up, never Googled that, but you learn it anyway. You learn things about healthcare that you would have never learned otherwise.
Yeah.
And so it gives you a good introduction and broad knowledge to things out in the world. It rounds your character, your personality, your skill set, and knowledge level.
So what's the worst part about being in this business?
So that's a really good question. It probably is kind of tied with the best part, and that's because it's moving so fast sometimes that you can feel, like I said earlier, overwhelmed. You can feel often inadequate, like, am I really doing the best, the latest, greatest thing? And there's the balance that you have to work between, giving the latest technology and something that's proven reliable, right? Because everybody wants that new feature, but they also want it to always work. And so sometimes those are mutually exclusive. You can't have the newest thing and also work. So that's a very difficult part. I guess that's a different question from the worst part of being in it. I don't know. I don't know if there's anything particularly bad about it.
Okay. You love your job. That's great.
The most difficult part. Oh, I do love it. I do love it.
Yeah. What about you mentioned from a local perspective, getting involved in some of the networking groups, to help grow your business. But what about from a peer perspective? Do you feel like you belong to an MSP community? Are there places where you're active, or at least you kind of lurk? From a community perspective, online mostly, not necessarily in person.
Online, I would say, because locally there's a lot of MSPs around here, but there's not necessarily a local MSP community. There's AITP chapter or so forth, but so there's a little bit of that. But online, there's a Facebook group or several Facebook groups that I'm a part of that I've been with for several months now, and those have been really valuable. It's good to bounce ideas off of other MSPs from not just around the country. I mean, there's people in there from Europe, there's people there from Australia, all over the place, and so you get some interesting IT perspectives on stuff that you wouldn't have otherwise. So having that is really valuable as well. And anybody that's starting off should look into getting into one of those groups so that they can really make sure they're starting off with some on the right feet. So
yeah. And what about Reddit? Do you check the MSP subreddit?
I should. I have one of my techs does. He spends time on it, and
Okay.
he'll often
Oh,
take
yeah.
me on, oh, hey, you need to see this, you need to look at this thing. So he'll kind of give me the highlights and stuff on that. But
Yeah. So
no,
one.
that's another difficult thing about the job. There's so many hats you have to wear
Yeah.
and so many things you have to pay attention to that multitasking can become overwhelming. So
Yeah. Well, one of we have a feature now, best of Reddit, that I go through about 3 or 4 different, subreddits, different threads, and look at the comments and kind of give my own commentary on it. So just as kind of we call it best of Reddit. I don't know if it's the best, but it's kind of what we feel. Hey, we can talk about it for a few minutes, before we jump into the interview. Um, so in terms of technologies, right? There's technology for your job, there's consumer electronics, all these types of things. What technologies are you most excited about today?
um, I might have to take a second to think about that. I mean, so I'm excited about blockchain.
Hmm.
Um, I think that has a lot of potential. It's got a lot of buzz. That has a
Yeah,
lot of potential to really change the way that we interact in a virtual way with each other. And the potential of that is it's hard to overstate, I think.
yeah,
How it's actually going to play out is difficult to say. So excited about blockchain stuff. Um, and for a long time, I'm I do like hardware stuff. I feel
hmm,
like hardware lately has become a little bit lackluster. Especially with some of the bottlenecks and ceilings we're running into, and then with the recent microprocessor flaws, that's a
yeah,
really a
yeah.
concerning thing. So that's interesting to me. It's very interesting to me, but I'm not really excited about that. Right? That poses a really difficult challenge for those of us that basically build our business on top of that reliability. And when that is kind of undercut, we have to really scramble to make sure that we're still sitting in the right place. So.
Yeah. So that might lead us to the next question. What technology are you most worried about today? What kind of
Well, like I
keeps you
was
up at
saying,
night?
I'm concerned about the flaws that are being found in the hardware
Hmm.
lately because they're on such a fundamental level that it's can be
Yeah,
difficult to mitigate. Um, but people are smart. They figured out how to build these in the first place. They'll figure out how to fix it. Uh, we're patient enough with it. Um, so always at the back of my mind is there's concerns about AI. I know it sounds a little science fiction-y, but the truth is that if you're not just a little bit concerned about AI, then you don't know anything about it.
yeah,
And so you need to be aware of that and some of the implications of it. It could be potentially the one of the best things that happens to us, and also one of the worst. So
yeah. One of the best or Judgment Day. Is there any
yeah,
in between?
there is in between, and that's what's so interesting about it. There's a lot of in between, and so it's like this could go anywhere. It's a wild card, and so it's exciting, but. But what's being done in that area is very interesting, but concerning as well.
Yeah, yeah. Skynet. We don't want that. Okay, so we are now to our rapid fire round. Used to be
Okay.
5 questions. It's now 7. We've added 2.
Okay.
So we'll try these out this week, see how they go. But just real quick, I'm gonna ask you just first thing that comes to your head. A lot of them are multiple, single answer questions, yes or no, whatever. So it's really easy. Okay,
Okay.
are you ready?
Yes.
Here we go. Apple or Android?
Android.
Mac, Linux, or Windows?
Windows.
Amazon, Azure, Google, or something else for cloud platform.
Amazon.
Okay. Local backups, cloud backups, or both.
Both.
Good. Um, is DNS really always to blame?
No. I didn't know if there was more to that question.
Well, no, I mean, it's like network problem. Oh, it's DNS. It's kind of like, so that's why it's
Yeah,
always,
well, it's an easy first place to check.
yes. Um, and then should you always virtualize? Yes or no?
Ooh, almost always.
Almost always. Okay.
Yeah.
And then finally, which is worse, printer support or vendor cold calls?
Ooh. Printer support's the worst. Like everybody knows that.
Okay.
So like I don't even know what vendor cold calls. Those are pretty bad, but printer support's the worst. Everybody knows.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. It's going about 50-50 on that. It's
Oh
in terms
yeah,
of
okay.
what people think is worse. So some people don't mind printer support that much, but they really hate those vendor cold calls. So I guess it's just up to you. So so great. Those are all the kind of questions I had. Anything you want to any knowledge you want to share with us before we sign off here? Any last words?
Um, well, it was good to be here talking with you, and being able to share some of my thoughts. We're, as we've talked about, we're always evaluating different options in technology, and I would just say, always keep your options open. The market is so competitive and rivalrous right now that if you don't stay on top of the game and watch out for things, then you're just going to get left behind. So.
Yep, definitely agree. Okay, Ben, thank you very much for being here on MSP Voice, and hopefully I'll talk to you again sometime soon.
Great. Thanks, Doug.